the worst things. An excerpt from Thomas Watson's A Divine Cordial, 1663. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. Romans 8, verse 28. We shall consider first what things work for good to the godly, and here we shall show that both the best things and the worst things work for their good. Do not mistake me. I do not say that of their own nature the worst things are good, for they are the fruit of the curse. But, though they are naturally evil, yet the wise overruling hand of God disposing and sanctifying them, they are morally good. As the elements, though of contrary qualities, yet God has so tempered them that they all work in a harmonious manner for the good of the universe. Or, as in a watch, the wheels seem to move contrary one to another, but all carry on the motions of the watch. Just so, things that seem to move cross to the godly, yet they, by wonderful providence of God, work for their good. Among these worst things, there are 4 sad evils which work for good to those who love God. First, the evil of affliction works for good to the godly. It is one heart-quieting consideration in all the afflictions which befall us that God has a special hand in them. The Almighty has afflicted me. Ruth 1, verse 21. Instruments can no more stir until God gives them a commission than the axe can cut by itself without a hand. Job eyed God in his affliction. Therefore, as Augustine observes, he does not say, "The Lord gave, and the devil took away," but, "The Lord has taken away." Whoever brings an affliction to us, it is God who sends it. Another heart-quieting consideration is that afflictions work for good. I have sent them into captivity for their own good. Jeremiah 24, verse 6. Judah's captivity in Babylon was for their good. It is good for me that I have been afflicted. Psalm 119, verse 71. This text, like Moses' tree cast into the bitter waters of affliction, may make them sweet and wholesome to drink. Afflictions to the godly are medicinal. Out of the most poisonous drugs, God extracts our salvation. Afflictions are as needful as ordinances. No vessel can be made of gold without fire. So it is impossible that we should be made vessels of honor unless we are melted and refined in the furnace of affliction. All the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth. Psalm 35, verse 10. As the painter intermixes bright colors with dark shadows, so the wise God mixes mercy with judgment. Those afflictive providences which seem to be harmful are beneficial. Let us take some instances in Scripture. Joseph's brethren throw him into a pit. Afterwards they sell him. Then he is cast into prison. Yet all this did work for his good. His abasement made way for his advancement. He was made the second man in the kingdom. You thought evil against me, but God meant it for good. Genesis 50, verse 20. Jacob wrestled with the angel, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was put out of joint. This was sad, but God turned it to good, for there he saw God's face, and there the Lord blessed him. Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face. Genesis 32, verse 30. Who would not be willing to have a bone out of joint, so that he might have a sight of God? King Manasseh was bound in chains. This was sad to see. A crown of gold changed into fetters. But it wrought for his good, for, So the Lord sent the Assyrian armies, and they took Manasseh prisoner. They put a ring through his nose, bound him in bronze chains, and led him away to Babylon. But, while in deep distress, Manasseh sought the Lord his God, and cried out humbly to the God of his ancestors. And when he prayed, the Lord listened to him, and was moved by his request for help. 2 Chronicles 33, verses 11 through 13. Manasseh was more indebted to his iron chain than to his golden crown. The one made him proud, the other made him humble. Job was a spectacle of misery. He lost all that he ever had. He abounded only in boils and ulcers. This was sad, but it wrought for his good. His grace was proved and improved. God gave a testimony from heaven of his integrity, and did compensate his loss by giving him twice as much as ever he had before. Paul was smitten with blindness. This was uncomfortable, but it turned out to his good. God did, by that blindness, make way for the light of grace to shine into his soul. It was the beginning of a happy conversion. As the hard frosts in winter bring on the flowers in the spring, as the night ushers in the morning star, so the evils of affliction produce much good to those who love God. But we are ready to question the truth of this, and say, as Mary did to the angel, "How can this be?" Therefore, I shall show you several ways how affliction works for good. First, affliction works for good as it is our preacher and teacher. Hear the rod, Micah 6, verse 9. Luther said that he could never rightly understand some of the Psalms until he was in affliction. Affliction teaches what sin is. In the word preached, we hear what a dreadful thing sin is, that it is both defiling and damning, but we fear it no more than a painted lion. Therefore, God lets loose affliction, and then we feel sin, bitter in the fruit of it. A sickbed often teaches more than a sermon. We can best see the ugly visage of sin in the looking-glass of affliction. Affliction teaches us to know ourselves. In prosperity, we are for the most part strangers to ourselves. God afflicts us that we may better know ourselves. We see that corruption in our hearts in the time of affliction which we would not believe was there. Water in the glass looks clear, but set it on the fire and the scum boils up. In prosperity, a man seems to be humble and thankful. The water looks clear, but set this man a little on the fire of affliction, and the scum boils up. Much impatience and unbelief appear. "Oh," says a Christian, "I never thought I had such a bad heart as now I see I have. I never thought my corruptions had been so strong, and my graces so weak." Secondly, afflictions work for good, as they are the means of making the heart more upright. In prosperity, the heart is apt to be divided. The heart cleaves partly to God and partly to the world. It is like a needle between two magnets. God draws, and the world draws. Now, God takes away the world, that the heart may cleave more to Him in sincerity. Correction is a setting the heart right and straight. As we sometimes hold a crooked rod over the fire to straighten it, so God holds us over the fire of affliction to make us more straight and upright. Oh, how good it is when sin has bent the soul awry from God, that affliction should straighten it again. Thirdly, afflictions work for good as they conform us to Christ. God's rod is a pencil to draw Christ's image more lively upon us. It is good that there should be symmetry and proportion between the head and the members. Would we be parts of Christ's mystical body and not be like Him? His life, as Calvin says, was a series of sufferings, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Isaiah 53, verse 3. He wept and bled. Was his head crowned with thorns, and do we think to be crowned with roses? It is good to be like Christ, though it be by sufferings. Jesus Christ drank a bitter cup. It made him sweat drops of blood to think of it, and though he drank the poison in the cup, the wrath of God, yet there is some wormwood in the cup left, which the saints must drink. Only here is the difference between Christ's sufferings and our own. His were atoning, ours are only chastening.